Greetings everyone, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, and I'm back to bring you another episode review from the Loud House European Road Trip arc. So let's get right into it. Today's European road trip episode is A Bite in Transylvania. In this episode, the Loud's tour bus breaks down while traveling through Transylvania, Romania, and when they turn to a dark, scary castle on a hilltop to see if someone there can help, the creepy owners of the house invite them inside, where everyone except Lucy assumes they're actual vampires. Remember when I asked if the next episode after Alpining Away was going to outperform the previous one? Well, unfortunately this episode underperformed, comparatively speaking, and thus the upward trend of each episode in the European road trip arc being better than the last has come to an end. However, the best thing I will say about this episode is that it's not even that bad. It doesn't really have any terrible writing or badly presented characters per se, but the story is incredibly basic with an ending that you can see coming a mile away. In other words, you pretty much know what the ending is going to be within the first 2 or 3 minutes, and it's not even a surprise when it happens. The story has the typical conflict of the main character, or I guess most of them, assuming the worst about the people with whom they meet based on their abnormal appearances and behavior. In this case, most of the Loud family think the strange, pale-skinned couple living in a creepy castle are real-life vampires. Everything they see freaks them out. The interior of the castle, the coffin, the many bats flying around, the use of candles for lighting, eating blood sausage, their creepy silhouettes on the walls, and even the man's name is Nosferatu, aka a long, formal way of saying Nosferatu, the legendary vampire character of Transylvania. Admittedly, with a name like that, and considering he has fang-like teeth, it's sort of understandable to think he may have supposedly bit Lucy's neck as any typical vampire would. That, and considering he and his wife wished they had a daughter like Lucy, only to an extent are the family's fears perfectly reasonable. Still, the story takes the things are not always as they seem approach when it comes time for the big reveal at the end. This episode is basically a different version of Fright Bite, and the central premise for both episodes are honestly not even all that different. Each episode dealt with the main characters thinking someone was a vampire based on everything they saw, and then it turns out the person in question wasn't a vampire at all. Each episode may have a different set of circumstances, but it's still the same general concept from start to finish. The one constant throughout would be Lucy being the only one who is actually excited about the spooky thing she sees. When watching this episode, take note of how she's the only one smiling while everyone else in her family is creeped out. In fact, she's the only one who doesn't buy into her family's accusations about the Ratus because she explains how vampires were driven out of Transylvania centuries ago. This would seem a little contradictory to Lucy's performance in Fright Bite because she and her friends truly believed the creepy guy they were following was a real vampire. I'm guessing she must have meant just the real vampires of Transylvania were no longer living in that specific area of Europe, so she kinda left the door open to the possibility of vampires existing somewhere else in the world. Maybe she didn't believe the Ratus were the real deal, but they looked and acted similar to the guy she thought was the real deal in Fright Bite. All of this seems confusing and inconsistent, but as usual, I digress. Anyway, because Lucy didn't want anything to do with her family's paranoia, she was the only one who didn't partake in dibs not when choosing who would be the one to sneak out to the bus to get food and stay up all night to make sure no one would get attacked by the supposed vampires. It's kinda weird she got out of doing those things because usually being the one to not touch their nose would mean they would be the one to do those things. Lynn Sr. is undoubtedly chosen to get the food, which he fails to do, and stay up all night to make sure his family is safe, which again he fails to do. Because he fell asleep, he and the rest of the family believed the creepy couple broke into their bedroom and took Lucy down to their basement for whatever scary thing the Louds thought they might do to her. So the Louds dress up as vampire hunters and try to attack the Ratus with garlic and an ultraviolet flashlight, and that's when it's revealed the Ratus were not vampires after all. Lucy explains why she was really taken down into the basement, and I liked how this was actually established earlier in the plot. At the beginning, Mr. Ratu advised against the Louds sleeping on their tour bus because of the blood-sucking gnats flying around outside. Later, Lucy explains that the bloody bite marks on her neck were caused by the gnats. Because she needed first aid, that's why she unblocked the family's bedroom door and why the Ratus took her down to their basement, so they could treat her wound. In terms of writing, this was a good example of setting something up early in the story, which then became relevant later. Gotta love that clever foreshadowing. After the Ratus explain that their jars of blood are actually filled with blackberry juice and their coffin is actually a tanning bed, and yes, some tanning beds do look like coffins, the Louds apologize for their ignorance and prejudice against their hosts, make amends by cleaning and cooking for them, and subsequently leaving on good terms. I mean, it's sorta hard to say these two were legit vampires when you can clearly see them eating garlic and nothing bad is happening to them. If that doesn't convince you that they weren't vampires, then I don't know what will. The writers could have easily swerved the audience by having these people transform into bats once the family left, effectively validating everyone's preconceived notions about them, but they didn't, and I respect that. Then again, it's believed the mechanic who fixed their family tour bus was said to look like a werewolf, but like Lucy said at the beginning, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, so we'll never know why this bearded guy was howling at the moon. Was he a feral beast or just some crazy guy who likes to act like a wolf? That's greatly up to interpretation. Overall, this episode is basic, predictable, but not terrible. By almost every metric, this is just Frightbite 2.0 with the generic lesson of how looks can be deceiving. Everyone in the Loud family except Lucy thought the Ratus were creatures of the night, but every scary thing they saw had a rational explanation behind it, and the family was made to look foolish when it turned out all their negative thoughts about this couple were completely false. Although I do have some questions about the inconsistency regarding Lucy's perception of vampires between this episode and Frightbite, she was still objectively the best character. A creepy girl staying in a creepy castle in Transylvania falls perfectly in line with her personality. Plus, she was the only member of the family showing any courtesy and respect to the Ratus for allowing them to stay for the night, so at least one member of the family isn't a total jerk. The story didn't swerve the viewers by showing the Ratus were actually vampires the whole time, so I really liked the ending in that regard, even if it was extremely predictable. The last thing I want to mention would be how the episode made a reference to a real-life Romanian health concern. Mr. Ratu said his allergies were acting up because it was ragweed season. The prevalence of allergic rhinitis to pollen is actually pretty common among people living in the northwest region of Romania. I honestly didn't know this was a real thing until I looked it up online. So the Loud House didn't make any of this up. The more you know. So in conclusion, this episode may be a huge step backwards for the European road trip arc, but if I had to pick which Lucy Central episode of season 8 was the best, it would be this one. It's better than the winning spirit, but only by a tiny margin. Unlike the latter, where ghosts have more or less become an overplayed phenomenon in the series, the former reinforces the notion that vampires don't exist in their universe, at least not yet, or from what I can remember. Not to say I'm totally against the idea of the show using them, but it's always a welcoming experience to watch an episode where everything feels, real. Basically, having a story where everything has a rational, real-world explanation of why things look and sound the way they do without having to overreach into the realm of fantasy as a means of making sense of everything. Sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not, but for an episode like this, I welcome the grounded in reality approach with open arms. That thing at the end with the supposed werewolf is still up for debate, but at the end of the day, that's neither here nor there. With one more European adventure remaining in the arc, will it be a vast improvement or a huge disappointment compared to this episode? You shall see soon enough. With that said, I give A Bite in Transylvania a 7.2 out of 10. Well folks, that concludes my review of A Bite in Transylvania. So I gotta ask, what did you guys think of this episode? Sound off in the comments below, and be sure to click that subscribe button for more Loud House related content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.